Skirk is such a wild character. She had her name revealed very early on in the game, but only made her first appearance nearly 3 years on the road, then proceeded to have a grand total of 5 seconds of screen time where she yeeted child, dropped Lord Nuke after Lord Nuke on us, revealed that she too has a master, and then dipped, leaving us with the knowledge that Surtalogy is bound to have the same treatment as a disciple, which is to say, you probably shouldn't hold your breath until he reveals himself. But worry not, because I believe we were actually given all of the information we need in order to start to understand who Surtalogy is, and, more importantly, what he is planning. Because when the final showdown unfolds, you can be sure you will be there. After all, Surtalogy may be hell-bent on defying fate, even if he has to destroy and remake all of Teyvat in order to do so. In this theory, I will be tackling what his goal might be, how he's going about achieving it, and the reason behind it all. However, because I really don't want to edit a 40-minute long video again, and you don't want to watch that, I'll be addressing his motivations in part 2. So let's dive in. I was not exaggerating. I do believe that Surtalogy plans to literally destroy Teyvat. There are several facts pointing us in that direction, the biggest of which is his name. Surtalogy is a name that stems from Norse mythology, but it does not refer to a god, a giant, or any other living creature, really. It is the name of the fire in which the fire giant Surtur will burn the entire world, one of the events foretold to happen during Ragnarok, when the earth will be destroyed, causing the death of many gods. Genshin is a big fan of referencing Norse mythology in all things Abyss related, which is why Khaenri'ah has names like Albrecht and Dainsleif, and among the dragons, the one that went into the Abyss to acquire forbidden knowledge is known as Nibelung. The writers really allow themselves a great deal of creative freedom with these references though. I mean, the Nibelung are actually a race of dwarves, with Albrecht being one such dwarf, so we can't claim for sure that Surtalogy will burn the world just because of his name. But it is such a specific name! After all, this fire had one job. I find it hard to believe the writers would completely deviate from the source material on this one. And really, with all the other hints currently in-game, it does seem like that's the direction they are headed in. Because Surtalogy is heavily linked to the Abyss. It seems to be his headquarters, if you will. And there is nothing more destructive to Teyvat and the order heavenly principles established than abyssal power. The celestial gods tore apart their own domain with the celestial nails just to get rid of forbidden knowledge. They sent down multiple nails. After the first one they were bound to know the consequences, but they couldn't afford to not do it. So anyone that purposely wields abyssal power is by definition a threat to Teyvat. This might have been Khaenri'ah's undoing after all. And then there is also the Latin vocals in the Narwhal's boss theme. I do not speak Latin, so I got this translation off of Reddit. The due credits are in the description if you want to check it out yourself. You want the thing from the deepest abysses to move once more. Watch and see that I oppose it. You believe in a world equal once and in the future. You shall lay down the laws. Let me remain standing as you devour the abyssal bones. Go, beware. I remain standing as you, abyssal ones, devour evils. Beware, oh, beware. This one is really interesting because when you read it from top to bottom, it seems like this might be sung from Slash's POV. They wish to contain the Abyss in order to lay down their laws and establish their world. But why would we ever get anything related to Celestia from the Narwhal? It is a visitor from beyond the Sea of Stars. It is neither their creation nor an abyssal creature. Going off this interpretation, these lyrics seem awfully out of place. Especially the second to last. If you oppose the Abyss, why are you turning to the abyssal ones to devour evil for you? But when you read it bottom to top, the story changes completely. It seems to be sung by someone who is urging the abyssal creatures to devour the world and establish new laws, abyssal laws. Whoever is singing it wishes to oppose a world that is equal now and in the future. I believe this might be Surtalogy's POV. It certainly makes more sense for us to get it from him than from Celestia, since the Narwhal is his pet. It also explains this weird line about equal worlds. By equality, I don't believe we are talking about justice. The history of Teyvat isn't exactly full of fairness after all. Instead, we have usurpers stealing the rightful thrones of the dragons, gods being slain for being too weak or peaceful, and humanity suffering under the whims of the divine. It wasn't a fair world in the past, and it likely won't be in the future. Rather, I believe this is in reference to Teyvat's samsara. The past, present, and future are equal in all things, because they are the exact same. We know that Teyvat is a cyclical nature that has likely been imposed by the celestial gods, but at the very least, they are aware of it as they punish the mortals that try to learn this truth. The world is fated to reset, and that fate might be what Surtalogy opposes. And who knows, perhaps the only way to do so is to destroy everything and start anew. Okay, so let's roll with the assumption that the Fowl is, in fact, planning to destroy Teyvat. That raises two very important questions. Firstly, and then what? Let's say he succeeds. Where does he go from there? And secondly, what is the reason behind this destruction? What exactly is he planning to achieve? In order to answer the first question, we need to turn back to Norse mythology and astrophysics, believe it or not. Everybody's heard about Ragnarok, right? Even if you don't know the specifics, you probably know it is a doomsday tale, detailing how the world will come to an end. What isn't as talked about, though, is what comes after Ragnarok. After the fires and floods subside, the earth will re-emerge and be reborn. Two gods, Hodr and Baldur, which were brothers, come back to life and Baldur becomes the new ruler. There are also two surviving humans that will eventually repopulate the entire earth. All on their own. Let the implications sink in. So, Ragnarok isn't the end, just the end of a chapter, and Surtalogi's plan may be very similar. Let's say that he really hates heavenly principles, and that is the reason why he plans to destroy Teyvat. He would be left with nothing for his troubles, right? He would still have the Abyss, but he already does. And if you consider the lyrics I showed you, depending on how you interpret them, he may be trying to lay down a new law and establish a new order. But obviously he can't really do that if there is nothing to rule over. He also doesn't seem to be hostile towards humans, regardless of what kind of being he may be. Yes, he allowed the Narwhal to go after the Fontainians, assuming he even knew what it was up to, but he also indirectly took Child under his wing. Skirk probably wouldn't have trained him if Surtalogy hated humans, and she herself might be human since she mentioned she hadn't been back to the surface in a long time, meaning she's probably originally from Teyvat. And for what it's worth, I do think Surtalogy took in a lot more humans, but we will get there. The point is, he stands to gain nothing if he simply destroys Teyvat. But if he brings it back, now that's a whole other story, and there are so many little clues littered around that suggest this is exactly what he's doing, starting with the Narwhal itself. Skirk was right about one thing. It is an odd choice of a pet. She also pointed out that allowing it to feed on the primordial sea seems like a huge waste of precious resources. Let's not forget that all life in Teyvat stems from the sea. Even Celestia needed it in order to create humans, and they recognize its worth because after removing its first heart, the OG Hydro Sovereign, they went through the trouble of creating a new one, Egeria. It seems far too important to be used as pet food, but perhaps that's exactly why the Narwhal was allowed to feed on it. Because it has life-granting properties. After you defeat the whale, you get the item Tear Among the Stars, which tells of the inevitable destruction of everything, even the Sea of Stars. However, it has one particular line that is extremely important. Until the end of time, until the Sea of Stars recess into nothing but dying embers, until a newborn world moves for the first time in the stomach of a whale. Subtlety went right out the window with this one. What does the Narwhal have in its stomach? A whole lot of primordial seawater, which means that it technically now possesses everything it needs in order to create life inside of itself. The Narwhal isn't a pet. It is the equivalent of the primordial one's eggshell, the cradle and limits of a new world. Surtalogy may be planning to recreate Teyvat inside the all-devouring Narwhal. And I use the word recreate purposefully, because I don't think the Fowl simply wants to bring about a brand new world. I think he wants to transfer life from Teyvat into the Narwhal. And that may be something that the Primordial Sea can help with. In the beginning, all life was a collective contained within it. Without blood vessels of their own, no life form could live individually. Even the Oceanids, which can take on a physical form, are defined by their ability to merge together. That desire for individuality might have been exactly why Egeria was moved to commit her sin. But in Fontaine, we explored the concept of the plasticity of water a great deal. The hydromimics from the adventure team sacrificed their individual forms to allow Anne to continue her quest to find Princess Lyris, but assured her that they could come back. They had done so before, after all. And this tells us that the information that makes an individual is preserved when it returns to the collective. So, even though the dissolved Fontainians reverted to their original forms and returned to the primordial sea, in theory, all that made them themselves has been preserved, meaning they could be restored to their human form. That life has not been truly lost. Perhaps Surtalogy actually wanted the Narwhal to go after the Fontainians for this reason, especially because he seems to potentially be trying to do a backup of other life forms. So let's talk about Skirk's power. This little sphere is 100% a black hole, and if you are thinking that no, that is a quantum element symbol, I ask you, why not both? I think they are both black holes. You got the accretion disk and everything. One of the drops from the Narwhal is also one of these tiny black holes that is described to be very heavy for its size and to attract things in, even light. So yeah, totally a black hole. Now, quick disclaimer, I am not an astrophysicist, nor is this a lecture, so pardon my watered-down explanation and feel free to correct me if I get anything wrong. But in the quantum world, information cannot be destroyed. If you have a small enough scale, you will see that everything is made up of the same stuff. For instance, a diamond is made of carbon atoms, but so is graphite. The only difference between the two is how those atoms are arranged. Information tells us how things should be arranged, and it also works as a sort of memory. Let's say that you have a piece of paper. If we burn it down, it is gone, reduced to ashes, just like Senora. But, technically speaking, the information that made it paper has not been lost, and if you could recover all of it, you could remake the paper, unlike Senora. So, information isn't destroyed, or at least that's the assumption that all of our laws of physics rely on. But black holes challenge it. The singularity of all of them is the exact same, no matter what has fallen into them, because black holes rip objects apart and turn them all into the same thing, just more mass. Problem is, black holes are also constantly losing tiny little bits of their mass in the form of Hawking radiation, which shouldn't be able to carry information with it, meaning that in the far future, when a black hole evaporates itself out of existence, all the information from the stuff that it gobbled up would just be Thanos snapped. So this creates what people far smarter than me call the information paradox, and a few theories have been suggested to try and solve it, one of which states that perhaps information isn't lost because a little part of the black hole that contains it splits off and forms a new universe. Fun fact, some astrophysicists believe we might actually be living in a black hole, with the Big Bang being our singularity and the edge of the observable universe the event horizon. Anyway, I'm way out of my elements, I should have just stuck with watching Interstellar. Hopefully that made some semblance of sense. Okay, so how much of this translates into Genshin? Very little, actually. Because I'd argue that all Skirk's black hole does is store information. When she used her power on the Narwhal, it was broken down into these simple geometrical shapes that constituted it. It was broken down into its information. Now, she didn't kill it, and neither did the Traveler in Nouvellette. She simply put it on timeout like a puppy that peed the carpet. She's most definitely planning to bring it back, so there must be a way to extract that information from the black hole and restore the Narwhal. But I will say that the theory of the black hole gone newborn universe matches with the idea of Surtalogy creating a new world and a description of the item we just discussed. Regardless, if this power is able to store information and condense it into such a small space, it might be the key to transferring life over to the Narwhal. Okay, so now we have the outline of this hypothetical plan, with the destruction and recreation of Teyvat. All that we are missing is his motivation. Why exactly would Surtalogy do all of this? What if I told you that this is actually his plan B, and that his failed plan A has a lot to do with the Abyssal Monsters, Dainsleif, Fate, and Constellations? And we will explore all of that in part 2. Even though we went over the plan proper, I would consider this first part to be the setup for part 2, so please stay tuned for that. Anyway, what do you guys think? Is this Surtalogy's plan? Is he actually trying to destroy Teyvat and recreate it? Or is all of this just one giant cosmic coincidence? Do let me know your thoughts down below. My name is Blue, and I'll see you again soon. Safe journey, travelers!